are some of the social issues that make us uncomfortable, but we have to face up to them. So I know there's a saying, I don't know if it's an African saying or a world saying, that says that if you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day. If you teach him to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Is that global or very local? It's global. Okay, we say it too. But then we have our own incantation of it as well, which says when you teach a woman how to fish, you feed a community. And then we have another version, which is when you teach a woman and you give her an education, you educate a generation. And so this raises the gender dynamic in solving some of these social problems, because once you add that component, then food security, human development, all of these issues become quite incendiary. And I'm raising this because in the conversation we're going to have now, the insights shared now, we're going to find out why it is that food insecurity tends to affect some members of society more than others. Certainly in the developing world, we know that 60% of smallholder farmers are women. And so when we're talking about a climate crisis, it is those smallholders who face it head on, watching the sun scorch their crops or the rains wash away their crops. They deal with it on the front line. When we're talking about war and conflict, which are realities in the world today, the face of those displaced and then facing a hunger dilemma are women, the elderly, and children. And when we block those humanitarian corridors, it becomes that constituency that is affected as well. And somebody who would know all about the very, very multi-layered dimensions of solving for the hunger crisis and why cooperation is needed is our next speaker. She is the very dynamic Executive Director of the World Food Programme. Please welcome warmly Executive Director Cindy McCain.
Thank you very much for having me today, and I look forward to an opportunity to discuss these issues and welcome a new audience to the things that we work on together. Let me start by thanking the OPEC Fund for International Development and all of the members for your long-standing support of the World Food Programme. Our relationship stretches back to 1981. That is more than 40 years of partnership and collaboration in our shared mission to end global hunger. On behalf of everyone at WFP, thank you for your steadfast support. Now, more than ever, we must collaborate to find short-term and long-term solutions to hunger and malnutrition. A global crisis is threatening the lives of over 300 million vulnerable people. Tragically, over 150 million of these are children. They simply don't know when or if they will eat again. This crisis is being driven by conflict, the economic aftershocks of COVID-19, and increasingly the global climate crisis. As each year passes, more and more vulnerable communities can be plunged into food insecurity by climate change. Their livelihoods are being destroyed as crops and livestock are killed by droughts, floods, and extreme weather, and land which was previously fertile becomes unusable for agriculture. Many of these rural communities live in lower-income countries. They're living right on the front lines of the global climate crisis, even though they have done almost nothing to cause it. In 2023, which was the hottest year ever on record, climate extremes pushed 72 million people to acute hunger. I saw this for myself last month when I went on mission to Zambia. The whole of southern Africa is in the grip of a devastating drought. It has been triggered by this year's El Nino and exacerbated by climate change. The drought is threatening to plunge millions more people into acute hunger in a region where many already face a daily struggle against food insecurity. As many as 30 million people are being impacted by this crisis. To be frank, I was really shocked when I saw in Zambia, a country that had gone from being a regional breadbasket in normal times to being added to the UN's latest list of hunger hotspots. Since the drought began, The country has lost more than half of its total maize production for the year. I met farmers who can usually grow enough food to feed their families and communities, but this year they harvested nothing. Their situation is heartbreaking and deeply worrying. They will have to wait almost another year until April of 2025 for the next harvest and a chance to feed their families. This rapid deterioration in food security, which has happened in a few short months in Zambia, underlines the urgent need to provide humanitarian support, and in the long term, to take collective action to support recovery and, critically, to help vulnerable communities build long-term climate resilience. This is the only way to prepare for frequent and more severe climate shocks that will come in the future. The good news is that we have many of the tools needed to predict weather-related emergencies before they hit and respond effectively. Climate risk insurance schemes, anticipatory payments, and resilience infrastructure programs can all protect vulnerable communities against the growling devastation caused by our heating world. Unfortunately, current adaptation efforts are often too little, too late. Families are losing their livelihoods, crops, and food reserves. Countries are losing infrastructure. WFP is a truly, truly global organization with a presence in over 120 countries, and we are strongly committed to using our extensive global reach to support broader efforts to address climate-induced food insecurity. Each of us here today must work together to support strategic investments that increase resilience and reduce vulnerability to drought and other extreme weather. And we need to be more innovative in our approach. As needs surge in many parts of the world, but humanitarian resources fail to keep pace, we need to find new ways to partner for impact. For example, we can explore greater use of innovative financing mechanisms. Right now, WFP is working with the African Risk Capacity Group to purchase insurance policies in several countries, which will help protect vulnerable communities in the immediate aftermath of climate shocks. WFP is also supporting governments to be better prepared with anticipatory action programs and to respond as soon as early warning systems highlight an impending related crisis. For example, in Somalia, which was recently hit by El Niño-induced floods, over 400,000 people received early warning messages 2 weeks before they hit, along with cash transfers and nutrition packages. It ensured that they were able to get through the crisis. In 2023, WFP implemented anticipatory action and early warning systems in 36 countries around the world, helping vulnerable communities cope with climate crisis. We also run programs to help farmers adapt to climate change. These include rehabilitating degraded lands and building community assets, such as irrigation systems, which allow farming to continue in harsher times. We also provide tools and training to support climate-smart agriculture. Since 2018, WFP has collaborated with a wide range of partners to run an integrated resilience program across 5 Sahel nations: Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger. The program includes work to curb the continued expansion of the Sahara Desert. Our resilience program has improved the lives of over 400 million vulnerable people across more than 3,000 villages. We have restored over 290,000 hectares of land, which has enabled many people to sustain livelihoods based on farming. I saw this positive impact for myself in Chad last year. The site I visited was in a valley in the middle of the desert. It was green and lush, and it was covered around 850 hectares. WFP and our partners have rehabilitated land, constructed dikes, and installed solar pumps. The local community has been able to start growing fruits and vegetables. The difference was dramatic. This has to be the future of climate resilience and sustainable development, giving communities a helping hand so they can help themselves. But we need ambitious new partnerships if we're going to implement cost-effective climate and resilient solutions at scale. This is why WFP is proud to support the OPEC Fund's Food Security and Climate Adaptation Facility, which is being launched here today. It's a sign of our commitment to work together. We all need to collaborate to adapt to a warming world, strengthening global food systems, and deliver lasting solutions to climate-induced hunger and malnutrition. Thank you for our shared mission. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you very much to you, Executive Director McCain. I remember reading recently through collaborative efforts between the WFP, FAO, and other multilaterals that, quite frankly, if you can get to gender parity, you will also get to zero hunger. And I hope that's the world we are aiming for as well. Our final conversation is aptly named Walking the Last Mile, and we really are in the last mile of today's high-level plenaries and deliberations. But we're talking about walking the last mile for small island nations and some of the least developed countries in the world. What we do know is small doesn't necessarily mean insignificant. Small people do big things, and what we want is for some of these island nations to really accelerate their development paths, and that we can learn from them whilst also supporting them to build resilience. In this conversation, I'd like to hand over now to the team as they speak to the Minister of Economic Affairs and Investment in Barbados, the Director General of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the Ambassador and Permanent Representative of the United Nations Office in Geneva, and the Vice President for Strategy at the OPEC Fund, Shaima Al-Shalbi.
Thank you so much, Lerato, and dear Excellencies, distinguished guests. It's a great pleasure to accompany you now as we have our closing conversation, and it is also an honor to greet our esteemed panel. This closing conversation is aimed at tying together the strands of the very rich discussions that we have had throughout the day, and which have absolutely highlighted the complex interdependence between the themes that we have prioritized here at the forum. If we're serious about getting back on track to achieve the 2030 goals, and as we were reminded, we are far off track at the moment, then we must simultaneously do all the things we've been talking about. Strengthen institutions, unleash the power of human capital, accelerate financing and development of smart and sustainable infrastructure, and absolutely walk that last mile on all of these. You know, it's a systemic challenge, and we know that. The SDGs are defined as a tripartite effort: environmental, economic, and social. And yet we sometimes overlook this as we sit in our very comfortable silos. So just to change our perspectives a little bit, I'd like to read you a text and then ask to whom you think it applies. Facing a future whose only certainty is change, they are confronted with many problems and difficulties, some timeless, others new, in making progress towards sustainable living. However, they have a record of thriving in difficult times. Their long histories are rooted in new and innovative approaches, societal mobilization, and technological adaptation. In contributing toward a new vision and commitment, action in their support must be rooted in the fields of culture, basic and natural sciences, social and human sciences, communication, and education, very much underlining what we just heard in that last panel. So who's the they in that text, dear audience? It could be any and all of us, right? Certainly, we humans are known for our persistence and our ability to adapt, and we also are all confronting unprecedented challenges. But in fact, that text is UNESCO's description of the small island developing states and UNESCO's program for supporting them. And I think that text beautifully underlines the systemic nature of what we're talking about, which is why we decided to focus on the SIDS in this closing conversation. So SIDS are sometimes described as the canary in the coal mine of climate change. And indeed, they are facing problems that will be coming at all of us. But the fact is, for that very reason, they are also innovative laboratories of sustainable solutions. And that's what we're going to be talking about. So with that, let me now launch our closing conversation by going to Shaima and to all of our other panelists to talk a little bit about your key takeaways from the conversations that we've had today. Please, dear Vice President Al-Shaibi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Melinda, and good afternoon to you all. So as we've heard today, the challenges are huge to achieving the SDGs. The task is actually daunting. But there are inspiring real-life solutions that are possible to implement. And what I really have heard today is that these solutions have to be issue-based, results-oriented, and people-driven, with clear emphasis on innovation and collaboration. And I don't mean collaboration in the traditional meaning of the word, but more like what Mrs. McCain has just shared with us. Ambitious partnerships, new ways to partner for impact, to actually deliver to the last mile. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let me ask Minister Blackman and Dr. Jules and Ambassador Falimaka to please also just do a lightning round to share your key takeaways from these very rich discussions we've had. Minister.
Thank you very much. Quite simply put, I want to echo that call for collaboration. If we're going to meet the SDGs, we have to collaborate as we've been doing before. But that collaboration must, one, be intensified, and there must be a retaking and restocking of how we do so. As we've heard throughout the day, the challenges are daunting, as you've just mentioned, but history has shown when the world has come together in meeting those challenges, success is almost guaranteed. Now, there are challenges, of course, that may cause us not to achieve these in a short period of time. But we have to now retool ourselves and ask ourselves, within 10 years, 20 years, are we going to be having the same issues being discussed? And if so, what progress have we made? And then lastly, when you look at the mode of reformation, whether it be financial reformation, whether it be reforming of institutions, we have to now take that forward and ensure that as we reform the institutions, making sure that they're fit for purpose to meet these objectives. Because my fear, and it's a real fear, is that sometimes we lose the essence of why we're trying to reform. In whose interest are we doing so? And that people-centered approach to development has to take center stage.
Thank you very much. Director General Jules.
Yeah, in the last 10 years I've been in this position at the OECS. I've been through hundreds of conversations such as this forum. And what I find particularly useful about it are three things. One, the focus on people. The emphasis has clearly been there. Second, the tangible commitments, because a lot of these conversations we've been in regurgitate the same rhetoric. But the commitment of the OPEC fund in particular, I heard from the president, 20 billion in the next 6 years versus 27 billion in the last 48 years. That is a tangible movement. It speaks to the sense of urgency that the fund has. And thirdly, the narratives of success and inspiration that we have heard from all of the speakers who presented the innovations that they've done today. And lastly, this point about the SIDS as a canary in the coal mine, you're quite correct. We are more than the canary in the coal mine. We are an ideal petri dish on a small scale to show innovation in a holistic, integrated way that can actually be scaled up in larger demographics.
And the themes all of you are emphasizing, that it's about people, it's about collaboration, are absolutely what has helped the SIDS and what that UNESCO text so beautifully illustrates, I think. Ambassador Falamaka.
Thank you. Let me first of all express my Secretary General's appreciation to you, Excellency, Mr. President, Mr. Abdul Hamid Al-Khalifa, for the invitation to the Pacific Islands Forum to join this important forum. Just my takeaways on this, I would also underscore the importance of collaboration. I've sat through the meetings today, and that seems to be the theme that came out very strongly, and that just bringing people together in the same room, and I think the OPEC Fund has successfully brought in different people to share ideas, share lessons, which some of us who are coming behind can learn from. So just sharing those ideas and also learning from what others are doing that are reaffirming some of the steps that we are taking that are coming behind you. So it's been reassuring to learn and also to commend the OPEC Fund for stepping into this space and stressing the importance of South-South cooperation. There is potential I can see from this forum.
So because all of you have mentioned the value of concreteness, let's get a little bit more concrete as we look toward the future. And Shaima, if I may begin with you, you are the Vice President of Strategy at the Fund. So talk to us about your strategic priorities now looking to the future.
Thank you, Melinda. So, we're an organization with almost half a century of track record, working across 125 countries. As Dr. Khalifa has shared in the morning, that we have an ambitious plan of deploying $20 billion from now until 2030 to support different aspects of development. So sustainable infrastructure, strengthening policies, human capital development, and of course, private sector, and more private sector.
Very good. Thank you very much. And how would you apply that strategy in the case of the SIDS?
So, the SIDS for us are not new. Since inception in 1976, we've been working in the SIDS. 24 countries, we've completed successfully 230 projects. In SIDS, nevertheless, the operating environment is quite different. The challenges are at a much larger scale. I'd just like to give everybody a fun fact, is that there are 1,000 islands in the world that belong to small island developing states and only 197 countries. So as you can see, the population, which is 65 million people, are extremely scattered. They're remote, and therefore they're heavily dependent on imports and on the ocean economy. This, in addition to the extreme impact of climate change, puts SIDS in a very special position. So our strategy at the SIDS is broadly aligned with our overarching strategy, but with a great focus on climate resilience, disaster risk preparedness, inclusive green growth, and as Ambassador has said, this is going to be a petri dish for solutions that are South-South ingrained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And clearly, for exactly the reasons that Shaima Al-Shaibi just underlined, collaboration, as you said, Minister Blackman, is so absolutely crucial with remote populations scattered across a lot of territory. Talk to us about the new role that Barbados will have as the global hub for the SIDS. How will that serve to foster additional collaboration and regional integration? Because we've heard a lot about the importance of thinking regionally. So tell us a little bit about how you see it.
Well, firstly, I think let me take the latter part first, and then I come back to the first one. When you look at the whole movement of regionalism across the world, whether it be the Caribbean, Africa, the Pacific, a lot of the strategies that countries are looking to deploy are best done so at the regional level, because there's scale and there's harmonization of approach. And when you look at the whole aspect of ensuring that there is a global hub for SIDS for us in Barbados, why is that important? Because it means, therefore, that you now have a center of excellence that can look at issues of climate change, international finance reformation, building infrastructure. Because why? As you rightly mentioned, there are a number of inequalities and peculiarities that SIDS face. And who better to do that and lead that approach than SIDS themselves? But international partnership is critical. And that's why for us, partnering with UNIDO in doing that and having Barbados as that center was so key. But in addition to it being centered there, one of the challenges that we have to confront, and this is a major thing that we have to be aware of, we talk about climate and climate resilience. But when you're talking about climate resilience, we often talk about infrastructure, we often talk about agriculture. But the labor force in SIDS has to now be so climate proof, because there are lots of different changes taking place over time. And if our people are not prepared for different variations of climate impact, we're going to be left wanting in the long run. So there's a critical role for the private sector to work with our governments to ensure that the capacity of our labor force is there. The academic community must also help in the reformation of the curriculum, because if you're looking at the skills needed within the next 20, 30 years, those skills are not going to be the same skills that we have today. So putting that in the context of climate change and climate resilience, I see the center and the global hub being that anchor that can take us forward in meeting these challenges and turning that into a series of opportunities.
We so often talk about education being learning to learn, but in this case, you're talking about learning to learn and adapt very quickly to new circumstances. Thank you very much. Dr. Jules, staying with that education theme, and in fact, education has been a central part of your work over the years. Tell us a little bit about where you see the most pressing challenges in the Eastern Caribbean states in trying to achieve sustainable development, also with reference to the development of human capital.
Well, as you say, education is central to all of this. And as an educator, I always feel uncomfortable when I hear some of the lexicon used to describe education transformation. In particular, that notion of human capital. Because fast forward or reverse back, 400 years, human capital was slavery. And I think we're still caught in that paradigm of seeing education as serving the needs of economy. And a big part of the missing picture for us now, given the challenges we face globally, there's increased racism, there's intolerance of all types, religious and all of that. There's a huge affective dimension that is not being addressed. So it's not just about the skills fit for the economy and the new direction, but also importantly, how do we need to look at education from three perspectives. Purpose, redefining the purpose of education, for the purpose of building human civilization, human sensitivity, as well as new economies. Second aspect of it is also pedagogy. Pedagogy and assessment, the other two remaining dimensions, because we are too driven by certification in our Western influence education system. So we need to learn, but also to learn to do. And the assessment has to help that process of learning. And in terms of the pedagogy, it also is not that Sir Ken Robinson was famous for describing the education system as a factory where children are put through according to the date of manufacture. We need to make education much more dynamic, more engaging, more practical, with more critical thinking and better social skills.
Thank you very much. And how about if we all leave here and try to replace the expressions human capital and human resources with something that talks about human potential, which is what the fund had in the title of its education-related session. So let's all do that, because it means treating people as an end in themselves and not a means to an end. That's very powerful. Ambassador, let us talk a little bit about institutions, because that too was a major focus here today. When you look at the challenges facing the Pacific Islands, what do you see as the key areas where strengthening institutions can help foster sustainable development?
Yes, thank you for that question. In terms of the institutions, as you know, many of our countries are very small. They have very small administration, have limited capacity and expertise to put in place the kind of conducive environment for development, for growth, and so forth. So for many of our countries, because they range in size from the smallest to the biggest, I mean the smallest country in the Pacific, and there are 18 of us, including Australia and New Zealand, but put them aside, the smallest is has less than 2,000 people, and on the one end, and on the other hand, the largest Pacific country is about 10 million people. So we have the range in the middle of this. So you can then gauge the size of governments to be able to put in place the right policies, the right regulations to harness growth and development. And this is one of our greatest challenges for many small island states. And so for us, the approach that our members have taken, given the common challenges that we face as being small island countries, open economies, reliant on a few commodities, and susceptible to external shocks of all kinds, whether it's economic, environmental shocks like natural disasters, and then exacerbated by the impact of climate change. So our leaders have decided or have adopted a regional approach to try and address the common challenges that we face, whether it's economic vulnerability, environmental challenges relating to climate change, and so forth. So in 2022, they agreed or they adopted the 2050 strategy for the Blue Pacific continent, and this is the framework for sustainable development for our region up to 2050. And this is developed out of our members' participation, including the participation of civil society and our communities. So we see the regional approach as a complement to the weak, I should say, institutional capacities in our member countries. The idea of working together as a group to try and take everybody together in the idea of as embedded in the theme for this session, the last mile, taking everybody along.
Thank you very much. So several very concrete examples there of what SIDS are doing as innovative laboratories in developing solutions along all of our major thematic areas here today. At the same time, dear Shaima, all of these require a lot of capital to realize successfully, and the clock is ticking. And I know that the OPEC Fund recognizes the urgency of that challenge. As I understand it, you've also brought your own initiative to announce here today. So please, the floor is yours.
Yeah. So yes, so in line with what everybody on that panel has been saying, their needs are huge, but they're focused. The countries know their needs. And so I'm very happy to announce an initiative that we've been all working on together, which is the OPEC Fund Island Resilience Facility. Here, we plan to mobilize and catalyze around $500 million from across all development partners to basically move a new approach. And this approach is a needs-based financing approach whereby we're developing bankable projects, so a pipeline or a portfolio of bankable projects to implement across all the SIDS that is based on the needs of the people and embodied in South-South collaborations. As you know, everybody here knows what they need. The islands know exactly what the needs are. And so this is what we've been working on. And to start, we've worked with the Pacific Island Forum and the Organization of East Caribbean States to put a pilot for these regions. Going forward, after that, we plan to replicate that across all regions of small island developing states. And believe me, Melinda, you know, we have, since inception, we've been working in small island developing states. And I've personally, in my previous lifetime as a country manager in operations department, have witnessed firsthand the extreme challenges. And what made us successful, for example, in a country like Maldives, and there's much more examples to give, is that we listened to the people on the ground and delivered based on those specific needs. And this is exactly what the OPEC Fund intends to do in this facility.
That sounds very inspiring. It's essentially an island-up approach, as you might say. Let me just jump back now to Ambassador Falamaka to get us started on a very quick response from our three small island developing states representatives here to what you have just heard. How do you see a facility like the one that Shaima just described helping you to meet those 2050 program goals that you have just mentioned?
Thank you, Melinda. Yes, I mean, we would welcome very much the support from the OPEC Fund towards building resilience in our islands. Certainly, the 2050 strategy will need to be implemented, and the Pacific Island Forum has been working with our members on the implementation of this strategy, including the a Pacific Resilience Framework, a Pacific Resilience Facility to try and mobilize resources for its implementation. And we certainly see this new funding from the OPEC Fund as complementing that initiative. Certainly the details will need to be worked out, but we would like to think that this can be a useful complement to the work that we are doing. And the reason why we were looking at the Pacific Resilience Facility for the Pacific was because of the challenges we face in accessing the Green Climate Fund. Many of our countries are too small. They cannot manage projects of big sizes. And therefore, the members wanted a regional facility. So we see the funding from the OPEC Fund as complementing the work that we are working towards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Jules, for the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, how do you see this fitting in with your strategic priorities?
It's right in line with our priorities, and I want to compliment the President and Vice President for their role in helping to negotiate this agreement that we're going to sign today, actually. The critical thing about it is that too many multilaterals, as I said, we've had meetings after meetings, the same discourse over and over. A lot of things are being projectized. This is not about projectizing work. It is a long road that has to be traveled, and it must be traveled collaboratively. One of the big failures in traditional approaches to aid and financing is that people don't listen to the voices of the beneficiaries and the people who matter most in the feed chain of this enterprise. So we're very happy with the approach being taken. It is completely distinct, in my view, from the approach normally taken by many multilaterals. And we look forward to working very closely with the OPEC Fund in this regard.
Thank you. And Senator Blackman, same question to you.
No, I think it's fantastic what you've been able to do. Mr. President, sir, you must be commended, Madam Vice President. Because why? Setting that in simple context, most SIDS are either classified as either high income or middle income jurisdictions, which therefore means that they're precluded from a lot of concessional finance. And what you're now doing and have been doing is providing, therefore, a line of financing that is critical to our development prospects. And therefore, let me state on record on behalf of the government of Barbados, salute to the institution for playing a strategic role. And I also want to take this opportunity to call on other institutions around the world to follow in a similar vein. Because why? SIDS contribute significantly to the global economy. But what must now happen is that they must have further ability to expand on their strategic objectives, particularly in the aspect of financing for development.
Thank you very much. So what all of you are telling me is that in fact, this facility absolutely represents walking the last mile when it comes to collaboration in a way that many, many other organizations are not doing. So back to you, dear Vice President Al-Shaibi, to tell us how you see the last mile now going forward and what you will be, where you will now be taking us next on that path.
Thank you so much. So, this facility is now at pilot phase. Over the next 6 months, we'll be delivering a pipeline of projects, pilot in climate resilience for both the regions. And this will culminate in 2 development forums to be able to mobilize public and private sector funding. Our North Star is to deliver 4 objectives. The first is climate resilient infrastructure. The second is to build the institutions and the people of the small island developing states to be able to put their own strategies, deliver their pipeline of operations, as well as to implement and monitor their operations. The third is to secure funding from the Green Climate Fund, from other MDBs, as well as, for example, from our ACG partners. And the fourth is not only to foster collaboration at the level of knowledge sharing within the regions of the small island developing states, but also to foster collaboration in terms of real critical infrastructure sharing, such as, for example, the regional hospital we plan to work with Barbados on building, and instead of people just using each island building their own facilities, we use the regional approach to actually tap into the concept of scale. That's what we plan to do, and hopefully next year we'll be announcing our success. Thank you.
Really exciting. I just took another glance at my UNESCO text, and it talks about the importance of vision and commitment to sustainable living. And clearly you are showing us a new vision and a deep commitment. And thank you very much for all of you for sharing your perspectives and insights on what we can learn from small island developing states and how we can work with you on innovative solutions. So that is, I'm afraid, all that we have time for. Let us please give our panel a very warm round of applause. And may I also say thank you to our audience for your attention throughout this day. It has been wonderful to be able to share these discussions with you. And now, back to Lerato.
Thank you, Melinda. Thank you very much to Melinda and all of you, Excellencies. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right, so in wrapping up the day, this is my summation of what's happened today. We heard from leadership that leadership matters in really galvanizing a nation and setting a vision. We also heard that policy needs to be data-driven, and we also saw that multilateral development institutions can craft policy or programs in a collaborative way, but also look at alternative models of interventions. And when all of this happens and you use data and put people front and center, then development starts to have a tangible transformative impact, because you're not just seeing people as numbers, as statistics, but you're seeing the faces, the voices, you recognize the names. And I think there's something to be said about doing development as multilateral organizations from the global south, because you're so close to the problem, and so you can tailor the solutions for those local needs while still aligning with global objectives, common purposes, such as what's happening at the United Nations in pursuance of the Sustainable Development Goals. And for the work you've done, the tangible interventions we've just heard about now, it's making a difference. And to that we want to say thank you for your commitment, for your insights, for your collaboration, and for seeing the face of development, not the theory around it. That concludes the 3rd Annual Development Forum brought to you by the OPEC Development Fund. Just a few notes. I know that many of you are going into breakaway bilateral meetings, but for others, there are some activities. We are in a truly historic setting. We're in the Heldenplatz precinct. I had to read that, see, because I don't speak German. So we're in the Heldenplatz precinct. And in this precinct is the Austrian National Library, but also the Spanish Riding School. And a tour of one of these facilities is available to you if you would like it. All you have to do is, once you leave this auditorium or this banqueting hall, go back to the reception area where you registered, and then we will break up into two groups for those who are going to the Spanish Riding School and for those who would like to visit the library. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I know that many of you have been able to RSVP for the gala dinner reception tonight. Please note that the reception itself begins at 6:15, but members of OPEC and Sherpas will usher you as to how to get to the venue, where your pickups will be, and whatever else information you're looking for. You can also revert to your conference pack as well if you're looking for details. Besides that, please enjoy the riding school, please enjoy the library, please enjoy the conversation, and once again, we thank you so much for your attention.